G'day and welcome back to the channel. On this episode, I'm going to show you how to install a gear selector to a classic Mini. Alright, so first step we need to do is jack up the vehicle to be able to get it on stands. Now, make sure, if you haven't already, check out the video in the link in the description above to see how to jack up a classic Mini. Now, one really good Tomo's tech tip here is make sure you got yourself a set of decent jack stands. Failure to have decent jack stands is going to result in failure, and it's likely to fall off, which is then going to cause serious injury and or harm. Worst case scenario, death, and you get what you pay for. So if you buy something of good quality, of good price, you're gonna get something of really good quality. If you just buy something that's fairly average, you'll probably find that it's gonna be fairly average sort of quality. So take from me, invest in the best that you can afford, and then that way you can guarantee or limit the fact of anything going wrong. All right, so this little sucker is what we've spoken about on a previous episode of Minisport. Essentially, this is the little contraption that enables you to have quick release for your rod change gearbox. This is only available for a rod change, and that is exactly what we have just down here. So I'm gonna show you guys how to fit it in a minute. Essentially, it is pretty simple. Like we've spoken about, there are 3 different types of gearboxes. Well, I guess 4 if you count the automatic. So we have the automatic, we have the rod change, the remote change, and the magic wand. So depending on the style of setup, this may or may not be applicable to you. As I said, it's only available for a rod change. So essentially, with the old rod style change, we have a couple of split pins in here, and we have the sleeve. So what we need to do is punch the old pin out through here. So we need to pull this one out, and then this little sucker will clip directly onto there and then go onto the gearbox. So pretty much it just comes off once you've got yourself a punch and you just push the dowel pin out of there. Now, you're gonna grab the new one and essentially remove one of the quick release couplings on it. So that'll just pull straight off like that, and it will pretty much just sit directly on there like it would normally when you've got the original style in there. Now, it is worthwhile noting as well that there are 2 different size opening holes. So there's that one, and then there's this one. So one of them is smaller, one of them is larger, which means that this will only go one way. The reason for that is at the front, it does have a little groove. Hopefully you guys can see that there. Sorry, it has like a little step. So you have the shaft in the middle and then a step on the outer edge. The thicker side is where this is gonna go. So essentially what you're gonna do is just grab it and just line it up with the bolt hole, and then that will just push all the way in until it goes all the way through. So I might just need a little bit of caressing to line it up and then push it all the way through. There we go. So pretty much just snaps straight into place like that. Once it's fitted, it will be fitted in there quite easily. This can go one of obviously 2 ways. You can fit this way through from bottom to top or top to bottom. Just depends how you want to go about it. It's probably safer, I would imagine, to have it facing the other way, but once we put it in the car, we'll see how it goes. Obviously, once you change the direction of one pin, the other pin is going to reverse as well. So depending how much room you have on the opposite side, you might be better off just leaving it how it currently is, but put it in and then see how you go. So let's jump onto the car. Let's start mounting this. Actually, before we do, I do have a couple of new rubbers to go at the back here. So these are just pretty much the standard replacement exhaust rubbers, or in our case, the selector rubbers. We do have some new ones, which I'll grab in a second. These are pretty straightforward. They're very easy to change. They do wear over time. So if yours is seeing better days, you're getting some vibrations, it's clunking through gear, there's a lot of an excessive movement in through the gear stick itself when you're changing gears, chances are the rubbers are probably worn. So if you're pulling this sort of stuff apart, you might as well just go and either buy the standard factory replacement ones, or in our case, we're gonna go with the polyurethane ones, just because it's gonna be a little bit firmer for the drive. All right, so I'm just gonna grab myself a 1/2 inch spanner, and we're going to loosen these off. Now, did just look at this a second ago, and as you can see, the old rubbers are quite large. The new one is It's quite small, so hopefully it's not going to cause that much of a drama when we get to put the new ones in. If it is, well, I might have to contact the team at Minisport again and figure out exactly what on earth is going on. So these are held in, like I said, with a 1/2 inch nut on either end. So there's a nut and a spring washer by the look of it. So you just want to make sure that if you're taking these off and they've got a little bit of corrosion on them, which these do, they're not overly bad. Considering we live here in Australia and the conditions, you know, vary, not as much as what they do in the UK. If you're going to pull it apart, you might as well just replace it. So during this build, I went and bought a heap of nuts and bolts, washers, spacers, you name it. I pretty much bought everything for this car, just so that way I've got spares, and that way when I'm putting it together, I know for the satisfaction that cosmetically it, you know, might just look, you know, real pretty, but also it's actually going to function correctly, that when you're putting something back together, you're not reusing old parts, you don't have the risk of, you know, things falling apart or stripping or just looking really average. So if you go into this extent, for the fact of probably 95 cents per nut and even a washer, you might as well do it. Go buy yourself a couple of dozen, get some boxes, label them, and then just have a spare container off to the side. That way, you know, when you're building it, you can just go in there, grab what you need, and then replenish your stock when you're getting low. So there's the new one and there's the old one. Like I said, pretty big difference between them, but you know, YOLO, she'll be fine. So they're just gonna sit directly on there, just like that. So it'll just sit directly in there. On the back side of this bracket just here, there's gonna be a spring washer and then a nut, and then that's just gonna tighten up on there, and then same on the top when it goes through the floor as well. All right, so we got my little chest of drawers here. I've went and bought a heap of stuff. Not all this stuff is from Minisport, but majority of it is. So pretty much we need 2 of these, 2 spring washers, one to go on either one of the mounts at the bottom, and then we got some bolts. I think the nuts are in this one. I've actually got them all labeled, or mostly anyway, so it is a really good idea that if you are doing any sort of stuff like this, make sure you grab yourself a couple of different boxes and then label them all. So this one, I really just need to go through and label the size of them. But generally there's only UNC, UNF, everywhere from 1/4 inch to 3/8, and that's really all you need. So it's not like you need, you know, 12 different thousand bolts that you may find at Bunnings, for instance. But you know, it's really handy to have something like this, a little storage facility. That way you can put them all in there, you know where they are, and you don't have to rummage through boxes after boxes and hours upon hours trying to find what you need. All right, so just grab it. This is when sometimes you need to be a bit of an octopus, like we've spoken about before, to be able to get these in. Put a washer on either side, hold it with your finger, and then be able to twist it. Probably doing this completely backwards. Hey, it actually works. So what I've done there is just put my finger in there and just twisted the mount. That way it works itself on. You don't have to sit there and try and tighten it using your fingers on the backside where the nut is. Now, because these are quite small bolts, you don't really need to be tightening them up heaps. You really just need to be nipping them up. Just enough to be able to hold it. You don't want to be swinging off it, and especially because this is urethane, you'll find if you over tighten it, it'll rip it pretty quick, and especially if you're going through and just replace them with the standard rubber type, you'll find that over time, if you're reusing them, when you go to put it all back together, when you go to tighten it up, sometimes you'll tighten it and then it will just snap the bush altogether. So if you're having any dramas, make sure you not only replace the nut and the washer, but for the couple of dollars that these are worth, you might as well just replace them while you're there. Cool, so now that is completely assembled, we're pretty much ready to go back in. Now as well, not entirely sure what this is. I think this is for the front steady mount, the gearbox steady mount maybe. Anyway, we'll work that out in a minute. It does have the new, or the old bolt through there as well. Mine was actually missing, so I had to come up with one, and mine is actually way too long inside there. So it's important to make sure that when you're doing these sort of things, like I said before, have an array of bolts at your disposal. That way you can go through and change them as needed. So I'm just going to work out what's going to be the best way to slide this in. I might actually put the gear stick up in there first. That way it saves me taking it off. All right, so I'm going to stick the gear stick up in there first. Awesome. Okay, so those holes line up, fabulous. Okay, so now we just have to work out how we are going to attach it to the bottom of the gearbox. I'm going to take this nut and bolt out of here, and then we should be able to attach it there pretty easily, I'd imagine. All right, so this bolt goes directly through here, and that's what steadies it, so that when you go to change gears, it'll actually go into gear. So I'm going to pull that one off there. We're going to slide that down in there, line it up with where it needs to be. Okay, might just pull it into gear. So we'll pull that out. So when doing this sort of thing by yourself is quite challenging, but when you don't have someone to give you a hand, it can become a bit difficult. Ah, there we go. Actually, that's going to work there. Because I've now pulled that on a bit of an angle, I do greatly prefer using the quick release mechanisms here because it is a lot easier compared to using the split pin method, which, you know, it's not too bad. It'll certainly do the job for you. However, it's just more of a dick around that you need more tools to be able to do it, whereas this you can literally just use a screwdriver to pull it out. Okay, so that one's in there. Now I'll just have to line that one up to make sure that it's properly engaged. Yep, there we go. All right, so now that's engaged with both of those. Got that on there, fabulous. Now the next thing to do is to mount it at the back of the subframe. Sorry, the mount at the back of the selector. So let's jump in the car and have a look at that, see if we can get that in there first try. All right, so I literally managed to fluke this and put the alignment of these bolts up through here, so pretty lucky. Sometimes you're not, and sometimes it's a bit of a pain, but let's put these on. I'm just going to nip these up using the spanner that I was using before, and then I'm just going to go back underneath, tighten up that one under there that I haven't done yet. And then that's going to be pretty much it for the episode. It's just a real short one today. Like I said though, that if you are replacing anything on your classic Mini like this that's rubber, you want to upgrade, you want a little bit better feel for it, it's worthwhile going to the polyurethane style for added rigidity and support, but also knowing that you've replaced it and it's going to last that little bit longer. All right, so before we actually go and tighten up the bolt underneath here, what I'm going to do is just make sure that it actually goes into gear. So that's neutral there. We go first, second, third, fourth, and then across, up. It's very hard to do left-handed. Sorry, there we go, and that's reverse. Fabulous. So we know that it actually goes in gear, and whoever's built the gearbox has done a good job. All right, so I'm just using a new nylock nut at the end here. Put that on, tighten it up. It does also have a nylon crush tube between this bracket on the gearbox housing just here. So it is worthwhile noting to make sure that you replace that if it shows any signs of wear and tear. All right, so that's it for this episode. I know it was really short, but it was pretty self-explanatory. Using that new quick release clip is a godsend of a thing, and it just makes removal of that so much easier, especially when you're in a rush and trying to pull the gearbox out, or if you have to do it on a frequent basis. Not only that, but also doing the new bushes, the rubber mounts for the gear selector to the body. It's certainly worthwhile doing that. If they do show any signs of deterioration, just replace them either with the standard rubber ones or upgrade them to the polyurethane for that little bit of extra rigidity and support that's in there. Like I said, I know this was a very short episode, but next episode we're going to jump on and we're going to fix the steering column that's in there at the moment. It does have a little bit of vertical movement at the bottom. I'll show you guys the new bush that we're going to be using. After that, we're going to jump onto the wiring harness, which is going to be an absolute spaghetti incident. So stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Black Mozzie and Tomo's Tune-Ups.